Welcome to Sex Help for Smart People. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Juergens, former science professor turned somatic sexologist and intimacy coach. This podcast is all about using evidence-based practices to help high-achieving women and their partners of all genders get the affection, connection, and great sex you want. So let's get at it. Hello, lovely people. Welcome to episode 9. We're talking today about how and where we look for and get our validation. A lot of people, including past me, use relationships, intimacy, or sex for validation in various different ways. It's not all bad, and doing it a little doesn't make us unhealthy, but there is a slippery slope and some pitfalls to avoid. So we'll go through those and look at how we can address these patterns, why they can feel really red flaggy to other people, how to avoid doing it ourselves, and how to avoid it in potential partners. So let's get started. All right, how are you today? I am pretty great. It is the first day of spring in 2024 when I'm recording this, and I get so excited for spring. I love how there are just all these wonderful spring things that happen and outdoors, and I'm just such an outdoors person, but I also love how people just get a little bit extra sparkly around in spring, especially now that I live on the East Coast and we have really marked seasons. When the buds start coming out, everybody seems to get a gleam in their eye. So today we are building on the last episode, actually. So it will be really helpful if you understand self-attunement, and you may want to go back and have a listen, because we are going to talk today about validation. And we're going to talk about getting validation from ourselves and getting validation externally. Neither one of them are bad. We're going to break all this down and see how these patterns of where we get our validation and how we get our validation affect our relationships, our connections, and our intimacy. All right, so first, let's define validation. It's just the recognition or affirmation that a person and their feelings or opinions are acceptable or worthwhile. Now look, let's separate out that opinions part, right? Because we can allow somebody's opinions to be theirs without agreeing with them. Many of us actually seek validation in our opinions. So that's why I included that. But what we're going to talk about today isn't so much our opinions being validated as us being validated. The person and our feelings feeling validated, acceptable, worthwhile. So what we're really talking about here is approval, right? Is it acceptable? Are we acceptable? Is it acceptable for us to feel a certain way? When we think about the word valid, it really means true, right? And at the extreme end of this, there can be a compulsive need to feel like everyone has to agree with us all the time, and kind of an inability to have our thoughts or feelings even gently contradicted or challenged. But really, we're not talking about the extreme end of the spectrum here today. And it is validation seeking, approval seeking is a spectrum. At the very extreme end, we see things like serious personality disorders, borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder. But here, I am not covering those. We are talking about interpersonal relationships in less extreme cases. And I'm going to focus on the less pathological side of the spectrum, but the very, very common ways that approval seeking and validation seeking in intimate relationships can kind of come and bite us in the ass. All right. So we can think about validation as approval. For emotional wellness, everyone needs both internal and external validation or approval. Now, look, there are some coaches from certain schools of thought that will say, or just some people, at large, that will say, you don't need anyone else's approval ever. I'm going to call bullshit. I would hate to see those people with zero approval from anyone because it's just miserable. It's a handy thing to say, but it's really not realistic. And I would be suspect of anyone who tells you that. Not suspect of them as a human being, obviously, but that opinion may not bear the test, right? If they really experienced having zero approval from anyone. You definitely don't need everyone else's approval, and you don't need anyone else's approval all the time. But if you get literally no one's approval ever, that is not healthy for humans because we are a social species. Approval is part of what helps us feel belonging in the social sphere of humans. And there is a ton of research showing that human beings literally require a feeling of belonging for mental and physical well-being. When we don't have that, what we have is loneliness. That is what happens when we feel no belonging and no approval. And it is less about being with others in proximity, like physical proximity, than about feeling a sense of belonging and approval. So the CDC reports that loneliness is actually associated with a 29% increased risk of heart disease and a 32% increased risk of stroke in adults over 50. Loneliness has physical impacts. So the aspect of belonging that requires approval from other humans is a basic human need. But so we need some approval to feel belonging, but we don't need everyone's approval all the time. And we don't need approval for every single thing we do. We just need enough to feel connected. And part of the problem with only getting external approval, if it is not balanced by healthy amounts of internal validation from yourself, there is nothing for the external approval to attach to. The external approval does not work to fill you up if you have no internal validation from yourself. It kind of slides right off. So no one can fill you up if you don't have your own cup there, right? That you have to create with internal validation. So internal validation from yourself allows you to receive and internalize external approval from others. Okay, but many of us actually don't validate ourselves, and we only look to others for it. So that's a problem because what other people give us just doesn't stick then. And I'm going to illustrate this with some very typical patterns. They're somewhat almost stereotypical because they're so common, and they might sound really normal to you because of how common they are. So, have you ever heard a woman in a dressing room or anywhere else, or you yourself have done it, ask your partner or ask her partner, do I look fat in this? Yes, you probably have. If you haven't, I do not know what rock you have been hiding under, what sort of like non-patriarchal rock, apparently. I would love to live in that world, but I have heard this so many times. Do I look fat in this? There is a lot of internalized fat phobia in our English-speaking cultures. So imagine this scenario. She asks, do I look fat in this? The partner says, No, not at all, babe. And you can see it in her face, or you have felt it if it is you. She feels no better. She is not reassured. You can almost see her saying to herself, oh, they're just saying that to make me feel better. I totally look fat, right? Or if you've experienced this, you know that feeling of, God, that did not make me feel better at all. And it's because this woman is giving no internal validation to herself. She has no approval for how she looks. So nothing anyone says is going to land. She doesn't believe it. The same thing can happen with, do you love me? Right? If we don't feel lovable, if we think we are unlovable, no one's love words are going to fill us up ever until we fix that. So we have to work on our own internal validation in order for external approval, compliments, love, all the good stuff to land. And I do this all the time with people I coach. We work on that internal validation. We work on the relationship with yourself because it is so foundational. And I think it's the most transformative and most powerful work I do as a coach is helping people learn to love and approve of themselves. And that is such a gift to everybody else that they interact with. It is such a profound gift to their kids, to their lovers, to their friends. When you're around someone who truly loves themselves, they don't feel selfish. They feel filled up and capable of actually spilling love out onto others. And it is just so literally priceless. I cannot tell you how much that is worth. When I made that change for myself, I would pay all of my money. I would pay all the money I have ever made and start from scratch to have learned that lesson. I am so grateful for it. And it is literally priceless. So I love so much that I get to do this as a job. And I love so much that I'm good at helping people find their own self-love. But digressing. So back to the whole validation thing. Many, many people are not giving themselves internal validation or enough internal validation. And you are not giving yourself enough if any of this feels true for you. So it could feel hard to receive external approval or compliments or words of affirmation. They feel kind of unbelievable or really just uncomfortable. Like you want them to almost go away. Like you really want them, but you also want them to go away. Another symptom is you are always moving the approval bar for yourself. So this means any sort of accomplishment that you have, you move on really quickly. You're already on the, telling yourself, but I haven't done X, Y, or Z, insert sort of the next higher bar, right? Yet you're saying, oh, I just graduated college, but, I haven't gotten a job yet. Or I got a job, but I haven't made partner yet. Or, whatever the next thing is. Oh, I got a job, I made partner, but I haven't had a baby yet. Whatever the sort of external, the bar that you are judging yourself is always moving. And you're always saying, okay, I'll approve of myself then. I'll get to feel good about myself then, right? All right, that means you're not giving yourself enough internal validation. Another symptom is if you feel like you really need approval from others. And I mean a lot of others. Like there's this sort of bottomless pit feeling. And the reason I know this is because I have felt this. I have been this person. So there is zero shame here, right? So many of us do not get very much approval as kids, or, maybe something happened along the way. Our sort of internal approval engine got broken. To be honest, that didn't happen to me. I never had one. I never got in approval in my family. So I just sort of started out with no self-approval and no self-esteem. And I had to build it from the ground up. So it's totally possible for you, I promise. But, when you have that bottomless pit feeling, it feels like you kind of barely notice when other people are giving you approval. You kind of almost hear the words, but they don't feel like they do anything. They just feel like like you wish that they did something, but it almost feels like you're a leaky sieve. Like you're a colander, the pasta water's all draining out, right? You might tell yourself you actually need it delivered more often, or you might need it delivered differently, but it's because it's leaking out. If you are self-approving well, you only need little bits of external validation, and it doesn't really matter how they're delivered. You'll take it. Like, it's just like, oh, yeah, that's nice. That feels good. And that has somewhere to land because I do think I'm pretty great. I'm glad that person noticed. Another one is that you want someone to tell you all the stuff you know darn well that you don't believe about yourself. You want someone to tell you you're pretty, you're smart, you're sexy, you're talented, whatever it is that you're having a hard time believing about yourself, you constantly want someone else to tell you. Another one is that you have a hard time acknowledging what you're not great at and being okay with it. If you are really good at self-validating, it's okay to have some failings and shortcomings. They don't feel shameful. They just feel like, oh yeah, I'm a normal human being because I'm great at these things and I kind of suck at these other ones, right? And it's not that big of a deal. So those are some common ones. Some other symptoms are like always leaning on other people's opinions over your own. Not being able to set boundaries. Now, look, that might also be because you don't know how to do boundaries, but if you feel really resistant to it, sometimes it's because you're not sort of approving of yourself as a being who gets to set boundaries. Also, chronic comparison. So if you are constantly comparing yourself to others, you are probably not validating yourself very well. Another one is that sort of pattern where you're kind of in victimhood to get sympathy a lot. And, normally people who do that a bunch aren't very self-aware about it, but I will just throw it out there so you can sort of notice when other folks around you are doing it. And look, there's some of these that really fall down along gender lines because of how much we are socialized around the gender assigned to us at birth. So if you are assigned female at birth, the world will make your worthiness all about your looks and attractiveness and how quote unquote nice you are to other people. So this means those of us socialized as women, can be often looking for validation around our bodies, our attractiveness, and making sure we're being nice to people. In sex, this can be really being attached to, for example, a partner's erection as validating whether we are sexy. It's unfair. It puts a lot of pressure on partners who may be having a great time, but it's really normal for erections to come and go. That situation, it's really common in heterosexual dynamics where, because women are socialized to look at erections as this sort of validation of our sexiness, and men are socialized to think they're supposed to be hard all the time, it just creates so much pressure and is one of the leading contributing factors to ED. Because of how men are socialized, their validation seeking is often somewhat disguised, but very much there if you know what to look for. So, one thing is mansplaining, classic validation seeking behavior, right? If someone wants everyone to listen to their opinions and tends to center themselves in conversation, right? Also, not asking questions, right? That's another way of centering yourself in conversation, telling your story, but not really asking or being interested in or respectful of other people's experiences or expertise. Another one that's really common for men is doing a lot of bro-like behavior, by which I mean putting people down, having overly strong opinions about stuff they know little about, like other people's bodies or decisions, or trying to be super quote unquote manly, like acting really proud, or things like lifting too heavy of weights at the gym, right? This is a validation seeking behavior. You want other people to see that you can lift this dumbbell, that you can't do it with good form, right? Like the form is total crap, but they are going to pick up the heaviest possible thing and like grunt a lot. Validation seeking behavior right there. Another one, so in sexual situations, for men, validation seeking can look like being hypersensitive to sexual rejection, being super focused on their partner having sort of an easy orgasm or having this like porn star-like experience that is looking to validate them, right? Another one is being not good at getting feedback during or about sex. So if a partner says, can you do that a bit differently? They tend to take it personally, right? Instead of, oh yeah, totally. Like you're the one who knows your body, right? So that can really shut down partners from asking for what they need, which is a bummer. But ultimately, these are all validation seeking behaviors. And if you have any or all of these, you are not a horrible person. You just probably have some things that need some healing, and that's okay. I was there too, and I'm still there a lot of the time. No one is 100% at this. Maybe somebody is, but I haven't met them. And if they act like they're 100% at it, they're probably lying to themselves. So it's kind of one of those things that you can get a lot better at it, and then you still have to do some maintenance, right? But when you do work on it and you do get better at it, it feels so relieving to everyone close to you. Because being around a person who does not self-validate and is really looking externally for all their validation is exhausting. Because no matter what you do, you can't fill them up. They're a sieve. Everything just runs out the bottom. And it feels like they're a black hole for your energy. And we can't constantly be in an approval offering for people all the time. It is literally exhausting. And it is just energetically so draining. So that is a validation black hole. And it's like, feels like you get kind of sucked in and you're never enough, right? It's a big red flag in relationships. So we want to try not to be that person, but also we want to try just for ourselves because trust me, it feels so much better not to be a black hole. We feel kind of disempowered and needy when we are, and just like we can't ever get enough. So ultimately, where this comes from, it usually is rooted in some sort of worthiness wound. And what I mean by that is there's an inner child in all of us, and where that inner child feels unworthy, and we have sort of just left that alone and then reinforced it with a bunch of negative self-talk, where we're putting ourselves down and not building ourselves up, it just gets sort of worse and worse and more painful and more painful. And this relationship with our own inner child is really a bullying one in that situation. We are bullying ourselves inside, and the most vulnerable part of us is feeling incredibly hurt by that. And ultimately, that's what's happening under the hood. if you're looking at a validation black hole under the hood at their worthiness wound. So fundamentally, it is a repair of the relationship with ourselves that needs to happen. When we do that, we feel so much safer to be around for other people. And we stop validation seeking with touch and sex. And that means we free the other person to have their own authentic experience. We can collaborate on joy and pleasure for the two of us together. We can be authentic, right? We're safe to say, to give feedback to. We're safe to ask something of, right? Because we're not super touchy because we're constantly seeking validation. Okay, so how do we fix this pattern and actually give ourselves approval? Does that mean we have to make ourselves better than everyone else? No, that is not approval, right? We can give ourselves approval, acknowledging that we are worthy and so is everyone else. We are good at some stuff and other people are good at some stuff. None of us has to be perfect to be worthy. Okay? When we just let ourselves be worthy just for existing, just for being, we were born this little innocent infant. At what point did we stop being worthy? We haven't. We just stopped noticing that we are, or letting ourselves be, right? So allowing ourselves to build ourselves up, not by putting other people down. It's not a zero-sum game, right? It's not a pie. It's not, I get some approval, that means you don't get this piece of approval, right? We can all give approval, right? And we can all support ourselves when we, for example, do something that aligns with our values, right? We don't have to give ourselves approval constantly. We're allowed to notice when we're out of integrity with ourselves. We don't have to beat ourselves up. We can say, oh, I am not in integrity with myself, or I could have done that better. I could have shown up better. But the more approval we give ourselves, the easier it is to do that, because we can trust that we're not going to beat ourselves down. Okay, so when we do that, when we give ourselves the approval, when we allow ourselves to really feel good on the inside about us, we also sort of shine it out in the world, which gives other people permission to feel good about themselves and gives other people a model. It also means we have more inner resources and energy available to come out as love and approval for others. So I think of that as being a validation star. We are full ourselves. We are shining out. We can receive well validation stardom. So there are, I think, 4 main steps, and they're not really linear at all, but there's 4 kind of components to get there. You can do some of these on your own. Some of them work better on your own than others. I will say, in my experience from my own path, they are all easier and faster with at least some coaching. So whether you reach out to me or another coach, somebody you trust, I do really suggest getting some help when you're ready to really tackle this, because it can just game change your whole life and also just feels wonderful. So it's really worth it. And you can also, you can start with trying to do some of this on your own also. So I'm going to outline them, the components as I see them, and you can see what you can start with on your own and just reach out if you want some help. Okay, so first component is the cognitive side of things. That's how we think. And what you need is a self-validation practice. We all spend a bunch of time breaking ourselves down, or at least most of us do, and most of us Any of us who have this problem, I can promise you, are spending a bunch of time internally, even if it's subconscious, breaking yourself down. And it might be a habit you learned in childhood or whenever, or maybe in a bad relationship, right? But it's really important to identify where you do that with yourself. What topics do you tend to break yourself down on? Where do you undermine yourself? Where do you refuse yourself approval? And then work to reverse that. And I don't mean throw a bunch of bullshit affirmations at yourself that you don't believe. I mean gently work to find a slightly nicer thing to say to yourself. Practice that until you firmly believe it, and then move on to a slightly nicer thing to say to yourself. Take it baby step by step. And I do this with people all the time, and I can promise you that if you just try to go from, my face is hideous to I have a beautiful face, the inner conflict in that is making it so unbelievable for you to make that jump that you won't help yourself. You can actually kind of harm yourself in that process. So take baby steps with the cognitive process of self-validation. And you are going to have to practice way more than you think. I'm talking mantra level like 1,000 times a day. Any new thing that is nicer, you're trying to learn to believe, you have to practice it like a mantra for at least a couple weeks. Because imagine you have practiced it, at least subconsciously, oftentimes for years, right? You have to counteract that and build these new pathways in your brain. So the cognitive work is using neuroplasticity. It's really powerful and it's totally doable. Identify where you undermine yourself. Start taking baby steps to be nicer. All right. Sphere number 2 to work in is your nervous system. So nervous system regulation, and especially helping yourself get easier into parasympathetic rest and digest more often and more readily will really help. So this is supporting your vagus nerve tone. If this all sounds like stuff you've never heard before, don't worry. I have a free video training on this that's about 45 minutes. I send it to everybody on my email list. So if you want help, just go join my email list on my website and I don't know exactly when, but sometime in the initial sequence of emails, you will get a bunch of free stuff. So, take whatever you want, leave whatever you don't want, but the vagus nerve training is in there, or you can just email me, laura@laurajurgens.com, and I will send it to you. All right. The third area where you need to work if you have issues with self-validation is the relational area. So we need to actually practice in relationship receiving approval from someone else and actually letting it sink in. Building a place in ourselves that actually absorbs the external validation and allows it to resonate in our bodies. So you can use any little approval you get as practice. Practice scanning for them, right? Or if you work with me, what we do is we create a system for you and we practice together and create this sort of landing strip in your body so that you can let the external approval start to sink in. The last one is working directly with your inner child. All of us have one, and she, he, or they, and actually we have more than one because we have sort of us at every age we've ever been, we carry along with us. Okay? And she, he, or they is probably needing some healing with you. Compassion, validation, approval that you have not given yourself in the past. So the past version of you, you're carrying along with you, and that past version you may have treated kind of shitty in the past. We need to repair that relationship. So I do that with clients all the time in a guided way and help them to repair with their inner child. But you can do it on your own too. You can look for your inner child and give them listen to what they need and then give it to them. Okay, so those are the 4 areas. Whenever you're doing any of that work, please be gentle with yourself and just be gentle with yourself about even having this challenge in the first place. The other thing I really want everyone to know is that you can't do this for anyone else. All right, this is just a disappointing aspect of reality that we all have to face. Everyone has to do this for themselves. You cannot rescue them. You cannot fix it for them. If you are in a close relationship with a black hole, even if your kid is a black hole, there are some strategies, and I'm happy to talk over, what is possible and what's not possible in a consult, for example. But I do want you to remember that no matter what, regardless of any of the strategies for sort of managing how you deal with things with your energy, you can gently encourage someone to get help, but that is all you can do, and you can't fix it for them. Okay? All right, so your practice for today is I want you to take a moment right now and see if, just listening to my voice right now, if you can kind of warm up. We're going to do a mini landing strip exercise. Warm up your something between your heart and your belly, like a bit of a strip of your body in the center of your torso, from your heart down to your belly, and see if you can allow it to become a little more permeable for a moment to approval from me. And you may be thinking, she doesn't know me. She doesn't know all the horrible things about me or whatever. That's true. I don't know you. And I don't know whatever you think about yourself that's so horrible. But I can promise that I think you are worthy and wonderful just for existing. I think you are enough. And I want to see if you can allow that to just sink in to your landing strip there, to your heart and your belly, that I believe, and I truly do, that you are worthy and wonderful just for existing. So see if you can just let that sink in just a little bit and just notice if it's hard. Notice if it feels a little bit good. Notice if it feels really unbelievable. That is yours. It's not mine, because I fully believe it. So notice that that's yours. And that's okay. That just means you have some work to do. And now I want you just to inquire what happens when you say it to yourself. I am worthy and wonderful just for existing. Say it now. Seriously, not fucking around here. Say it. I am worthy and wonderful just for existing. Can you believe it? If you can't believe it, you have some work to do. Or if it makes you feel like you're better than someone else, you also have some work to do. Because everyone is worthy and wonderful just for existing. Now, part 2 of your practice today is when you get home, I want you to write out 5 things that are awesome about you. If you're home right now, go do it now. If you're not home, wait till you get home. 5 things that are awesome about you. If that is hard, you have work to do. It's okay. I couldn't do it once upon a time either. And that wasn't that long ago, that was only, 5 years ago. And I was actually pretty amazing, but I couldn't do it. I didn't know I was pretty amazing. I didn't know how to actually access my self-approval, regardless of how many things I'd accomplished. I had a PhD. I was really smart. I mean, I was like in so many ways a good friend. I did things that helped people in the world. And I still could not write down 5 things that were awesome about me. And that was a real wake-up call. It was a great one. I'm so glad somebody asked me that question. And I want to be the person to ask you that question. So it's okay if it's hard, but challenge yourself to do it. And if it's really hard, you have some work to do. That's okay. All right, my friends. I really hope this has been helpful. I give myself self-validation. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I think it probably is. And I'm not shy about that. I'm going to model that for all of you. All right. Have a wonderful spring if you're listening to this when it first comes out, or a wonderful day wherever you are, whatever hemisphere in the, southern hemisphere. Have a wonderful start to fall. And I will see you all here next week. If this podcast was helpful for you, please consider going to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leaving a 5-star review. Not only do I really appreciate your time doing that, but 5-star reviews really boost the show visibility, which helps people just like you who need it be able to find it. Thank you so much. I'll see you here next week.